he was taking Percocet and Roxy's, and he went there, and when he did his urine test, it didn't come up for oxy, it came up for fentanyl. So this whole time he thinks he's doing Percocet, and you can't get anything out there anymore. Yeah. So if you're out there right now, you're in any stage, you were playing Russian roulette with your life, with the opiates and the benzos and whatever I was doing. But now you might as well put a bullet in a gun, spin the wheel, and put it to your head, because that's what you're doing.
Where you are now may not be where you came from. The choices you make today may spiral out of control or spin you in the right direction. Discover a riveting, true story of how Carlos Vieira nearly destroyed his life and lived to tell about it. Stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness. Knocking doors down along the way. And don't miss others telling their powerful stories on our podcast. Visit kddmediacompany.com.
Welcoming to the podcast, we got Fig Newton himself. What's going on, good sir?
What's going on, Jason? How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to speak with you. Thomas Figlioli. Of course, a great book. That's What Junkies Do. Thank you again for sending me a copy. I am almost done with it, so I've jumped around, but an excellent read for anybody that wants to hear your life story. Of course, if you're watching the video or listening to the podcast, we got the link in the description on how you can find Tommy's book, and it's a great read, man, and really encouraging and really bold of you to put it all out there.
Thank you. I everybody said that to me when I decided to write it. I always liked reading memoirs, especially addiction memoirs, real life stuff. I like reading Mafia memoirs too, which is something I grew up around, and I'm really interested in it. And when I got out of treatment the last time, my sponsor had made me write my first step out. And he wanted to know why, where my life was unmanageable with alcohol and before alcohol, before drugs came into the picture. And I sat down, I wrote that, and by writing that, it kind of sparked something in my mind. And, I would speak at meetings or speak at rehabs doing service, and those stories I would tell, I started writing them. And I started in my iPhone notepad, I was just jotting them down. And, I worked for the New York City Department of Sanitation. And back then I was on a garbage truck, and I was working with this guy one day, and I asked him to read one of the stories. And he read it, and he looked at me, and he just said, listen, he goes, I don't know what you're doing hanging out with us. He said, but you have a talent. He goes, and you should pursue it. And from there, I just started writing, and it just kind of took on a mind of its own. And 3 years later, the book was out.
Yeah.
You said sanitation and then Mafia memoir. Am I the only one who thought of Tony Soprano? Am I the only one who thought Tony Soprano?
He's not working with cement mixers.
Because I love Mafia movies, shows, all that. I love that. So if I'm the only one, I'll shut up. But
no, I have a funny story. I went to Atlantic City. This was years ago. And I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we were in the front row at a comedy show. And he starts in on both of us, and right next to me was this older couple from Connecticut. So he starts in on them, and then he comes to me, and, he's in on my girlfriend and me, and he's like, oh, so where are you from? And at the time I lived in Brooklyn. So I was like, oh, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. He goes, and what do you do for a living? I'm like, sanitation. He goes, I'm sorry. And he went back to the other two from Connecticut.
You're damn fucking right. You're sorry. Get away from me.
But it's not that sanitation.
But you also mentioned, kind of writing in the stuff where life first became unmanageable, which is such an interesting thing that I've started to look at. Where did you really identify that? Because you talk very vividly about your childhood, especially stuff relating to your dad.
Yeah, it started early. I started the book, with my intro, and then, with when I hit the kid in the head with the bat.
Right.
But even before that, I tell a story too that when I was a kid, we used to collect baseball cards, and all my friends would go out and buy boxes, and I didn't have the money to buy them. I could just buy packs at a time. So when my parents were at work, I would go into my father's room, and I would empty out his quarters. He had like this big jar of quarters that he was saving for a supposed trip to Italy that we never went on. And, I would empty $13 in quarters. I would go down to the store, I would buy the cards, and then I would open them in front of my friends and brag about it. And then my friend ratted on me, and I got caught, but I kept doing it. But then I would do it, and I would go and I would sneak into my own house and open the cards in private because I couldn't let anybody see me. So I was like 7 years old doing this stuff.
Right.
And like I look back on that and I would get a high from it. You know, I would get a high from stealing the quarters. I would get a high from opening the cards, but I was already hiding it from people.
Right.
You know, I had to hide it from my friends because I didn't want to get caught. And it was just stuff like that, you know, that the fear and anxiety that I didn't know I had at the time. And just always trying to fit in and be different. You know, never comfortable in my own skin from a very young age.
Yeah, totally understand that. Do you think it was kind of the home life and stuff of that nature that made it uncomfortable? Was there a lot of, I kind of got from it the relationship, especially, you know, maybe it might be insightful to talk a little bit about your dad there, because you say normal childhood, but then you do go into some of your dad's behaviors. And for me, that was like okay, I can gel with you there.
Yeah, so normal in a sense that they put on a good front. Sure. You know, my parents, I was young, so I didn't really know what was going on. I knew my father was different, you know. I was wise enough to see, you know, the money and the car and the jewelry and all that stuff, and the way he acted, his bravado, and, you know, he was different. That being said, you know, I never really suffered from any of that when I was really young because he was always taking me, you know, Met games, Jet games, Ranger games, you know, 2 vacations a year I talk about in the book.
Right.
And when we were around other people, you know, my parents were fine. Like, they got along at times. My father was aside from, you know, the adultery and the gambling and the crime, yeah, he was a very magnetic guy, a very charming guy. So he was very light. To this day, I still see people and they still talk about how great he was and how funny he was. But, you know, behind closed doors, there was a lot of stuff going on that as a young kid, I didn't realize. But as I started to get older, I started to see it, you know. And I go back to this one time. My father owned a car service in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. And every time I went there was always this guy that lived next door to it. He would always give me money. And I realized later on that my father's car service was the only one in like a 10-mile radius because that was the only one they would allow there. And it was a front.
Right.
But, you know, my father came home one night and there was a cockroach on his jacket arm, and my mother killed it. And then they argued for like 2 hours over whose roach it was. Like, my father's like, that's not my roach. I know what my roaches look like in my office. And my mother, and it wasn't over a roach. Like, you know, in Bronx Tale, when he says it wasn't over a parking spot.
Right.
You know, it wasn't over a roach. It was over all the stuff that was boiling down underneath that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
And my parents didn't talk for like 6 months after that.
Jeez.
And, you know, I hear a lot of people talking about growing up in abusive households and yelling and screaming. As an only child growing up in a household where 2 people don't talk to each other, that's terrible because you could cut the tension with a knife and you can see how they just don't want to be around each other. You know, and they didn't start talking again until my father had open heart surgery. I was in like 4th grade. And I never forget them coming home and telling me. And in one sense, I was upset that my father had to get heart surgery. But in the other sense, I was so happy because my parents were talking to each other for the first time in 6 months. So, you know, it was normal in a sense. But, you know, looking back on it, it was dysfunctional, you know, and I guess it did have an impact on my life growing up. You know, as in the book, I talk about how years later, the marriage breaks apart. And that's kind of where I really go off, you know, on my own and get into all this other stuff.
Yeah. Do you feel like witnessing that with your parents at such a young age had an impact with you and your future relationships as you got older?
Not really. I think it had a better effect because I feel like I try to communicate more.
Yeah, you knew what you didn't want.
Yeah, in sobriety. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I was active, you know, my relationships were terrible.
Right.
But, you know,
sure. Welcome to the club.
But in sobriety, you know, I'm married for 4 years, but I'm with my wife 11 years, and you know, we have a great marriage, and communication is probably the best part of it. Like, she's crazy. I make fun of her all the time. She sat next to me on the couch the other night, and she's asking me, why do you love me? I want to know reasons. I want a list. And I'm like, are you serious right now? I'm trying to watch the Met game. Leave me alone.
Oh, geez.
But it's stuff like that. Like, that's why I said, this is why I love you. She's like, why? Because we sit here and bicker all the time? I'm like, no, it's these conversations. It's being this comfortable with somebody. And being able to do that stuff, like just sit on the couch and talk about this nonsense and just have a great time doing it, And, I say this and I'm not tooting my own horn and people might not believe me, but I've never cheated on a woman in my life.
Hey, me either, buddy.
Awesome.
That's what I'm talking about. Yep.
And it was the one thing, everybody always told me, don't do drugs, don't drink, don't gamble, don't do this, don't do that, because look what happened to this one, look what happened to that one. It was the only thing that I saw my father do that I was like, I'm never going to do that, because I saw what it did to my mother, and I never want to do that to another person. And I tell my wife all the time. My wife always says, oh, what do you got? You're going out to see your girlfriend? I said, I will divorce you before I cheat on you. If it came to that. Sure. And she's like, that's supposed to make me feel better. But I don't mean it like that. I just mean I would never do that to somebody, because I saw the damage that it did, and it just stuck with me my whole life. So and all in all, I think seeing my parents' relationship has made me better at my marriage.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You knew what you didn't want as far as a relationship. Yeah. It can easily go the other way with some people, because that can be normal to them, and they could think that awkward tension is normal. But, you went the other way, which is the better way. And another thing I heard, we got to go to the East Coast to find a woman, because I have yet to find one that'll sit down and watch a Niner game with me. Is it almost over?
No, she won't.
Is it almost over?
She'll sit down next to me and complain the whole time. She asked me the other night if David Wright still plays for third base for the Mets. It's like he retired 5 years ago, So she'll sit next to me, but she doesn't really pay attention.
Yeah.
That's all right. We each need our own shit, right?
Yeah, no, we definitely do.
Well, that's really interesting, because following into the addiction, I know that my behavior, especially relationship and where my stuff started. So I commend you for never cheating on anyone. But we did talk about with childhood, that first, the rush of hiding stuff. So when is it that the drugs or alcohol, which was kind of first that came into play for you? Because you speak in your book about, you were different, but still wanting to fit in and kind of, following the leader, so to speak.
Yeah. So, 16 years old, my parents split up, and I saw my father like 3 times after that, and he died when I was 21 years old.
Oh shit.
And I lived, again, I was an only child, so all I really had were my friends. Like, my cousins lived in my house, but they were older than me. My cousin Michael was 13 years older than me. My cousin Stephanie was 17 years older than me. Great people. They're like my brother and sister to this day, but as a 16-year-old kid, I couldn't go to them, and they were doing their own thing. So I gravitated towards, kids in the street, and those guys that I looked up to as a young kid that were on my block, telling me to go hit a kid in the head with the bat, and me listening to them, they're out on the corners and they're in the schoolyards and they're drinking beer and they're smoking cigarettes. And there was a kid that I had played baseball with. He was my age, and we were really good friends. We had a little bit of a falling out. And I saw him one night walking out the block, and he was with these 2 beautiful girls, and he was smoking a cigarette and he was drinking a Budweiser bottle. And I looked at that and I was like, wow, like, I want to talk to those girls, but I'm afraid to talk to those girls. But in my head, I guess I put 2 and 2 together. I said, maybe if I drink beer and smoke cigarettes, maybe I could talk to those girls. And that's really as simple as it was. I think that night I stole a Marlboro Red from my cousin, and I smoked it in my bathroom, and I got sick, and I ratted myself out, told my mother, I smoked, I'll never do it again. And then 2 weeks later, I was hired and packed some Marlboro Lights in my mailbox, and then, they used to hang out in this schoolyard up the block from my house. And it was just like everybody from all these neighborhoods just hung out. There was like 100 kids there every night. And, I wanted to go up there, and it just wasn't comfortable. I was scared. To go up there. And then one night we had a party, me and my friends bought a bottle of vodka, a bottle of peach schnapps. That was the first time I got drunk, and I hear a lot people say as soon as that drink hit my lips, I was home. I knew I was all right. And it wasn't the case with me, but after I drank and then I went to a party, I was talking to this girl that I liked, and I didn't even think about it. I went right up to her. I talked to her, and I wasn't scared. I wasn't nervous. I was funny. Everything flowed. And then afterwards, I was like, oh my God, this stuff works, and 2 weeks later, I was up in that schoolyard with those kids, drinking 40s, smoking cigarettes. And that's where it started, 16 years old, and it just never stopped.
5150 is power. The power to overcome. The power to persevere. The power to set your life on a course for success. When you're faced with the challenges life throws at you, you focus and do what is needed to go beyond what is required. So stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness, knocking doors down along the way. We are 5150.
I can imagine it's a really tough time for your mom, obviously, the divorce and then having a, teenage son, and probably she's having to work or hold down a job or two. And
yeah, 2 jobs. She works 7 days a week. And, my aunt lived with us, and that was a huge help. My aunt was like my second mother. She helped raise me. I talk about her. She has a chapter in my book about her. She passed away too in 2004. She was probably the most important person in my life because she was my mother, but a lot more street smart and savvy, and I could go to her with anything. Like, she was my aunt, but she was my friend.
Right.
And I could tell her all these things. And good part about it is she understood. I guess not so good part about it looking back is she defended me a lot to my mother, saying that it was normal that I was doing this stuff. I was a kid and, not to worry because I'll grow out of it. And I never did.
Well, you did because we're talking now, but it just took longer than you wanted.
Yeah, it took a lot longer than it should have. But it was definitely tough for my mother, and I look back on it, I can't imagine what she was going through. But, that's why I do what I do today. I try to make up for it as much as I can.
Absolutely. Yeah, that living amends. What we always like to ask because, I get where you're saying like it wasn't fun at first, but then realizing, wow, I had a little bit of confidence, that liquid courage. Was there actually any period of it that was like fun? I had fun, and then it hit that point of like, holy shit, this has gotten way more unmanageable.
Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun. At first, like I said, it didn't, as soon as I drank, it didn't hit me. But later that night, I realized what I could do with this stuff. And I loved doing it. I didn't want to do anything else. I was a high school hockey player. I think I quit the team about a month later because I just wanted to drink and hang out, And then I went to college. I was in college for 5 years. I was one big party. I in the book, I call it a big party with a $20,000 a year cover charge.
Yeah, and, no shit.
Right? A girl I went to school with just read the book the other day, and she called me. She said that was so right on point because that's exactly what it was.
Right.
And I always said, everybody drinks like me, but that wasn't the case. I was drinking with a different group of people every night. And I never went to class. It took me 5 years to graduate, and it would have been easier if I just did the work. I never went to class, never did the work. I would take the tests, do halfway decent, and then have to go and beg teachers for grades. And, oh my God, my parents got divorced and I can't afford it. I need my scholarship. And it was a disaster, complete disaster. But it was fun. I had a lot of fun doing it.
If it makes you feel better, it took me 7 years to graduate college, so you're ahead of me.
I'm 2 years ahead of you.
And to make both of you feel better, I didn't go to college. So
there you go.
But you were a really good student, though. I mean, which kind of shows your superpower. You're just an intelligent guy, and you wrote the book yourself, right? There wasn't a ghostwriter. Yeah.
Yes, I did.
So it's incredibly impressive. But you're an intelligent guy. You were a good student, but you weren't an attender of class.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, up until my freshman year of college, I had never failed a class. I was there on scholarship, and my first semester, I failed 5 classes because I just never went to class. Never. I drank every night. I pledged to fraternity, and I just drank all day and night, every day, every night for 4 months, whatever it was. I got put on probation, academic probation, and then the next semester I went back, and they gave me a deal. They said, if you get above a 3.0 this second semester, you can't have your scholarship back, but we'll give you a grant to subsidize, because I gave them the whole my parents got divorced and my mother can't afford it act. And I went back like it was nothing. I still drank, but I did enough to do well. And I got like a 3.4 GPA. And then the second year I did the same thing. And I did it every year after that. I would do terrible, and then I would just pick it up. It was never about intelligence. It was just about me wanting to do one thing and not the other.
All right. What was the scholarship for?
It was the Dean's Business Scholarship at Pace University. So it was for business administration.
And
that's what I graduated with.
How did you even get that scholarship?
I applied for it when I was in high school, and between my grades and my SAT scores, and they just awarded it to me.
Yeah. So was schooling just kind of came more natural to you, or?
It did, yeah, it did. And, grammar school, high school, it's easy. Then when you go to college, you actually kind of have to work a little bit. I didn't want to do that, But it's, I say it all the time. If I put half effort into it, I would have wound up, with a 3.7 GPA. I basically put about 20% in, still graduated.
Right.
So,
what did life look like post-college?
Post-college, I graduated in 98, and I was 23 years old, and I had gotten a job in this Irish bar in town. I went to college in Pleasantville, New York, a town in Westchester. And I was hanging out in this bar so much that the guy just gave me a job there. The name of the bar was Foley's Club Lounge. It was a small Irish bar, a lot of cops, firemen, older people, and the owner wanted a college crowd. So me and a couple of my friends used to go there just because we liked it. We liked the food. And he offered me a job, and I started working for him. And he was great. He was like 38, 39 years old when he hired me. And I was always looking for that father figure, always looking for that guy to look up to. And he was that for a time. And, I worked in that bar. And when I graduated, I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave that life. I didn't want to leave that town. So I wound up getting a job off an apartment off campus. I work in that place. And my mother's like, oh, you got to get a job. You got to get a job. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'll get a job. And, I get a call from a guy in Brooklyn, and he offers me a job being a bookmaker for him. He was a connected guy, and he ran a business, a bookie business, and he knew that I was into gambling. So he asked me if I wanted to do it with him. And then when I told him I had all these people with me, he said, oh, well, if you do this, I'll give you a percentage. And I became a bookie, and that's what I did. I was a bartender and a bookie. And, I thought I was, like you said, Tony Soprano. I went out, I bought the pinky ring. I was wearing the track suits. Yeah, I was like, this is it. I've arrived.
I have a pinky ring and a track suit.
But, it was crazy because the girl I was with at the time didn't want any part of that. She was like, you have to do something with your life. And she gave me an ultimatum, and I chose, I didn't want to stop living the life I was living. So, she leaves me. And now I have to go back out there. I have to go back out and find another girl, and I'm hanging out with different people. And again, like, I'm still that scared little kid. Yeah. I'm 23 years old, but I never dealt with any of that. I picked up alcohol, and that solved everything. So I don't know how to live normal. Mm-hmm. And now these people I'm hanging out with, they were doing ecstasy. So one night, the kid came in, he goes, yeah, take one. And I was scared to take ecstasy because I was like, oh my God, my heart's going to explode, whatever. Yeah. I took one pill that night, and then I wound up taking 7 that night.
Oh, fuck.
And then I took it every day for like 6 months straight. And then one night I went to get it, and he didn't have it. And he handed me a foil packet, and it was cocaine. And back then, that was one of those lines I didn't want to cross. Cocaine to me was it is a hard drug, but like back then, that was like, oh my God, cocaine. I think of Len Bias and friggin' the movie New Jack City. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I thought. Scarface. I think cocaine's this awful, awful thing that I never wanted to do. And all those thoughts went through my head, and I grabbed the foil packet from him. I went in the bathroom. I did my first line, and I never drank again without cocaine. Mm. I fell in love, and it was off to the races after that. It was every night. And within 2 years, I burnt every bridge I had up there, and I wound up having to move back to Brooklyn, and that's where I get the job in with the Wall Street firm.
Yeah.
But I had interned in that spot when I was a kid. From 15 to 21, I worked there in the summers, and I worked there like after school, certain days of the week. So they all know me as this little kid. And now I come back with a college degree. They give me a real job, making good money, thinking that I'm that same guy. And I just wasn't that guy, And when I moved back to Brooklyn, I said, I got to stop doing coke because I'm out of control. But if I could drink and smoke weed, I'll be fine. Because when I was doing that, I wasn't stealing anything. People weren't intervening on me. Nobody was telling me I needed to go to rehab or I had a problem. So if I just drink and smoke weed, I'll be good. And I did that for like 2 weeks. And then one Friday night, I'm talking to my friend, and I'm like, I used to get that bell in my head. After a certain amount of alcohol, I just needed to have Coke.
Sure.
And I asked my friend, and he knew where to get it. And that was it, off to the races after that.
It's really interesting to hear what your drug, when you hear cocaine, was just like, whoa, that was just next level. But when I was doing cocaine, I would hear like ecstasy and be like, oh, no, fuck that. You know what I mean? It's just, it's really interesting to hear. And I feel like it's pretty, everybody's top, oh, no, was heroin. I think that would be pretty safe to say, the needles and all that. But yeah, that's interesting how you were nervous not nervous, but just tried the 1 and then did 7. Like, do you remember how the 7 or 8, I guess it would be 8, made you feel?
I wound up, I lived with this kid. His name was Brinsley, big Irish kid from Boston. He was my partner in the bookmaking operation. He was my roommate for my last year of college. Very good friends with him. And he winds up coming out of the house at like 6:30 in the morning. It was a Sunday. It was a Sunday morning. It was a Saturday night that I took it. And I was outside with no shirt on playing basketball. And I wanted to go to church. And I said to him, I said, come on, let's go to church. And I made him walk with me all the way down this. It was Bedford Road in Westchester. I had no shirt on. And we walked all the way to this church. And then I looked, I said, I can't go to church with no shirt on. And I made this kid walk all the way back. And I loved it. I did it every day after that for like 6 months. I loved ecstasy,
Wow. Fucking see, that's again, the interesting thing for me. Like, okay, been presented Coke. Yeah, tried it. Weed, definitely went to college for 7 years. Booze, my thing. But like, friends, when it was like ecstasy, is like, oh no, you guys dance till your feet bleed. Fuck that shit. I'm gonna just go pound a 12-pack and drive home. Like, any of it's normal and okay. It's just the fucked up part of the addict brain.
Well, it's crazy too, like how quick a mind can change, because prior to taking your first pill, you were afraid of your heart stopping.
I was.
8 pills later on that same night is just, that's insane that you're still here.
Oh, absolutely.
We're all glad.
That was nothing. I mean, it gets far worse, as time goes on. And with the ecstasy too, I used to take it for no reason. I remember one year the Mets, it was 99, and the Mets had opened up in Japan, and they played at like 6 a.m. So I worked at the bar, and we stayed there till like 4. And then as we're leaving, I put a pill in my mouth, and my friend's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to take some E. He's like, why? I was like, I'm going to go home and watch the Met game. He's like, you're going to go home and sit in your living room at 6 a.m. tripping on E watching the Mets? I'm like, yeah. He's like, bro, you're not going to be able to do anything normally anymore after this. And, but that's the insanity. Like, I just did it to do it. I didn't do it to like go out dancing. I like taking ecstasy and sitting on my couch and hanging out.
Yeah.
I just love the feeling.
And what actually would the experience be like to sit and watch a baseball game on ecstasy? Because to me, it is that mind-baffling thing. Like, I think of it, the people that I knew that did it was the party drug,
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt really good watching the Met game. I was by myself. It was 6 a.m. There was nobody around, drinking a lot of water, eating a lot of vitamin C drops. I mean, it just insanity. Very, very insane.
Yeah, but it was crazy. I bet you're pretty fucking manic, right? Oh, I forgot the chips and dips. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. It's crazy looking back on it, the things you do. But like I said, I fast forward, and now I'm back in Brooklyn. I'm 25 years old,
right?
And now I'm back on Coke, and I'm doing like an 8-ball a night. I'm drinking every night, and I started getting sick. I started waking up with the shakes, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And, I go to the emergency room, and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you. So one day I go to work, and I physically couldn't work. Like, I was shaking so bad. I was sweating. I leave work. I go home, and my aunt looks at me, and she looks at my face, and she says, Thomas, you look like my mother did right before she died.
Oh, fuck.
And I said, thanks a lot, Aunt. And she goes, no, your skin is gray. What's wrong with you? I said, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to die. So she drives me down to my mother's office. The doctor that she worked for was a good friend of the family, and a man I still talk to this day, like, here and there. Excellent, just a great guy. And, I go into his office, and he's asking me the normal questions. So, how do you feel? What's wrong with you? And I tell him I'm going to die. He's like, you're not going to die. And I'm saying, if you knew what I did last night, you would understand why I'm saying that I'm going to die, because, it's out of control. I think my heart's going to stop. So he asked me, he said, well, do you drink? I was like, doc, only a couple of beers here and there. He's like, do you do any drugs? I'm like, no drugs at all. So, with the information I gave him, I'm sure he had his suspicions. But with the information I gave him, the only thing he could deduct was that I had an anxiety disorder. And he prescribes me Ativan and Klonopin. And he tells me, when you feel like this, take one of these. What you're having is an anxiety attack. This will help you.
Right.
So I went home that day. I took one of these pills, and I felt better within 20 minutes. And next day, I, go to work. I come home. I drink. I do coke. I wake up the day after that, shaking, sweating. I take a pill. I feel better. And I'm like, that's it. I got my solution. Now I could do what I want at night and just take one of these pills in the morning, and I'll be good to go. And that lasted about 2 years. And then in February of 2002, I wound up in a psych ward. I lose that job for various reasons that I talk about in the book. Right. And then, I asked for help, and, I wind up getting locked up in a psych ward, at 26 years old. And then, that's where it took me. And, when they I think I'm going to rehab, like this nice rehab, the only thing I knew about rehab when I saw on TV, like my guilty pleasure as a kid was Beverly Hills 90210. So I think of like the rehab that, Dylan went to, that the nice one, and with the water and the pool and the beautiful women.
Marble floors, ocean views.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I get to this place, and, they take me into the emergency room. It's a hospital. And they take me up in an elevator, and the elevator doors open, and this big steel door buzzes and opens. It closes behind me. And I look around, and I'm like, this is not Beverly Hills 90210 rehab. Right. And my mother is behind me with my aunt, and they're crying. And the doctor is, that same doctor from Brooklyn, is standing next to them. And he tells me, he goes, this is a psychiatric unit of this hospital, Tommy, and you're going to be here for the next 2 weeks. And I'm like, wait a minute, like psych? Come on, this is not what I wanted. This is not where I belong. Joke's over. I'll stop doing cocaine. Take me home. And like, no, you have to stay here. And that's what happened. They left, and I remember calling all my friends and being like, oh, you got to come get me out of here. And they're like, oh, no, you're good. I apparently was the only one that didn't think I belonged where I belonged. Right. And so I go back to my room, and I'm crying now, because I'm like, how did my life get here? Then it all starts flashing, and you're like, oh my God, like what is my life right now? I'm 26 years old. I have all this promise, and I'm sitting in a psychiatric unit in the middle of Long Island. What happened? How did my life get here? Yeah. And, there's a knock on the door, and the lady says that there's a meeting down the hallway. It's like, AA came up. And I said, I'm good, man. I'm here for cocaine. I don't have a problem with alcohol. So I don't think I have to go to that meeting, because I didn't want to stop drinking. Drinking was like part of my life for 10 years at that point, and I didn't think that was the problem. So she says, maybe you should go down there and listen. Here's something that you might need to hear. So I go down, and I tell this story all the time because it's a very pivotal point of my life. And this guy came. He was from Staten Island. He was probably about the age I am now, and he talked about driving to East New York, Brooklyn to buy crack, and he wouldn't have enough money to get back over the bridge, so he would have to collect cans in the street. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, this guy's smoking crack, collecting cans. I did a little too much coke, and I'm in this place, but I'm never going to get there. Like, that's never going to be my life, so I'm good. Like, I don't have to listen to this guy anymore. And after the meeting, I talked to him, and I actually, in so many words, told him that. And he looked at me, he said, kid, if you keep thinking the way you're thinking, you're going to keep doing the things you're doing. And sooner or later, your story is going to be mine, whether you like it or not. Man. So maybe you should really rethink your life and just take a good look at it. And I was like, all right, thank you. And I shook his hand, and I walked away. And next 2 weeks, I told everybody what they needed to hear. And I get out, and my aunt picks me up at like 10 in the morning. And by 8 o'clock that night, I was drinking again. 4 days later, I'm at a house in Hunter Mountain in upstate New York. I'm in the bathroom. I'm doing coke. Yep. And like a month later, I took my first OxyContin. That OxyContin turns into an 800 milligram a day habit. Fuck. And You know, at 27 years old, I was sitting in a house in Pennsylvania with a shotgun under my chin, wanting to kill myself. You know, and you know, I come home. I went to my cousin's house in Pennsylvania to try to dry out. I wind up wanting to kill myself. I don't. I come back to Brooklyn, and I go on for another 2 years after that. Like after that depression and misery and wanting to kill myself because I can't live the way I'm living anymore, I go on for another 2 years. And 2 years later, I'm collecting cans for crack money. My story became that guy. That guy's story.
Fuck.
I'm smoking crack. I'm sniffing 2 bundles of heroin every day. And, you know, I broke. You know, I couldn't take it anymore. And I finally asked for help. And I was finally like deep down sincere and legitimate about the help I was asking for. You know, and my poor mother and cousin, I sat down with them. Leading up to that, I took a box of Chlorocidin, cough medicine, because I had tapered off my drinking and drug use for about a month leading up to that night. And it was actually a year to the day that my aunt passed away. And I'm sitting at dinner with my mother, and I told her, I said, Ma, I think I'm going to stop for good. And she's like, oh, that's great. You know, I hope you do. And I said, I have some heartburn. Could I get $20 to go to the store and get some Pepsid for my, you know, for the heartburn? So she was like hesitant to give it to me, but she gave it to me. And I sincerely was going to go and get Pepsid AC.
Sure.
And then I went to the store, and I'm in the aisle, and I see Chlorocidin. And I remember seeing a special about it like months earlier, that if you took enough of it, you get high. And just like that, you know, it just like reflex. I bought the box, and I took like half the box. And I can't even describe the feeling. It was all over the place, but I was very high. And she asked me what I had taken. And I said, nothing. I'm blowing in her face to tell her that I'm not drinking. And I saw it in her face that she was done, that she had it.
Oh.
And it scared me. And I said, that's it, I'm done. And I sat down with her and my cousin, and I told them everything. And they were just like, you know, they were taken back. But, you know, they were very supportive. And, you know, I started going to meetings the next day, and I stayed sober for 3.5 years. And I got everything in my life that is good, that was good, was because I got sober and because I was working a program. You know, I met the girl, I got the car, I had some money in my pocket, I got the job that I'm still on today. And, you know, I started going, and I started not listening anymore. The open-mindedness wasn't there anymore. The willingness to learn wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And I just stopped going, you know. I used to go to my home group all the time, and we had a kitchen in the back, and I would get there an hour early, sometimes 2 hours early, and we would all eat. And we had a crew. We called the crew. I actually just went to one of their son's 5th birthday this past weekend.
Right on.
And we used to go there early, and we used to sit in the back. We used to either order food, or we used to cook in the kitchen, and we used to eat, and we used to talk, and we used to laugh. And that's what I wanted. But once the meeting started, I went back into the kitchen, and I complained about who was sharing what, and I can't listen to this anymore, and I'm not coming here. I can't do this anymore. I'm fine. It's been 3.5 years. I'll be good. And, you know, I hurt my back, and I went to the doctor. He prescribed me Vicodin. And I remember taking it and saying, I shouldn't be taking this. 6 months before that, I broke my ankle, and I turned down painkillers. I told them I was an addict and I couldn't take it. And that was right before my 3rd anniversary. Fast forward 6 months later, and I took the prescription, and I drove to a pharmacy, but something in my head told me that I should call somebody. So I called my friend Chris, and I told him, and he sat on the phone with me, and he said, throw it away. Come to my house. We'll have dinner. We'll talk. We'll play video games. You'll be fine. I said, all right, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung the phone up. I walked into the pharmacy. I filled the prescription.
Man.
I put it in my car. I went to his house. I didn't tell him about it. 2 weeks later, I took one Vicodin, and that was it. Very long, convoluted story. It took me 8 years to get back from that.
Fuck.
You know, and it's just, I could be here for another 3 days telling that whole story, but
yeah,
there were times that I tried to stop. I went on this Suboxone program. Then I figured out how to go back and forth with that, and then I was back on benzos, and I had a couple of surgeries in that whole process, so it always became very easy to go back and forth on painkillers, and then it just blew up and exploded. There's only so long when you're an addict like us, like me, that you could hold that at bay before it just gets out of control, and it did, and it took me 8 years. 8 years. It was like 2 years of in and out, and then just 6 straight years of just every day, doctor shopping, buying pills in the street, just insanity, I got promoted on my job. I'm a supervisor now, but I was driving a garbage truck around, Brooklyn, New York for years, not really in the right frame of mind to do it, and just very dangerous, very irresponsible. And,
did you
thank God I'm alive.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Thank God I didn't kill anybody else.
Oh, yeah. I know for me, that was the big thing when I had a DUI accident, was that I didn't harm anybody else. Is my greatest gratitude. It's like, I still have injuries that I suffer for. Same thing. Can't do the Vicodin and the opioids. Not that I had a problem before, but I got that fear for sure that if I did, it would be like, oh, okay, I found something new. Yeah. Did you incur any legal troubles throughout the whole process? I mean, I know you spoke about stealing and things of that.
I did. No, I never did. And, I have a lot of people. I work with this guy. He's the best. He's technically my boss, but he really isn't. We sit next to each other and we kind of work on the same level.
Sure.
So he reads the book. And, when it first came out, I had a lot of people calling me and saying, we're so happy that you wrote this book, but honestly, we're surprised you're still alive. We're surprised you're still alive, blah, 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 blah. He goes, enough of that surprise you're still alive. He goes, how did you never get arrested?
That's what I'm wondering.
I don't know. The only thing I can attribute that to is God. I mean, never being in that wrong place, because there were times that I was supposed to be somewhere and I just happened not to be there, and people got arrested. I talk about it in the book. One time I was going to pick up cocaine, and some kid in my neighborhood asked me to go get beer for him instead. So I gave the money to somebody else to pick it up for me, and they wind up getting arrested instead of me. The whole thing in that firm, I was threatened with legal stuff, and because of my cousin's position there, they kind of let that slide.
Sure.
Other stuff in, the bank, I didn't get caught for. And, by the grace of God, that's all I can say is by the grace of God, because any given day I could have been locked up.
Yeah.
There's something I didn't put in the book. I can't remember exactly when it happened, but my aunt was sick, and towards the end, I always got my OxyContin and my Percocets from her stash. And one time I went up to her house and I saw a prescription pad, and I had been taking so many of them that I didn't want to steal them from her, not because I didn't want to steal them from her, it's because I didn't want to get caught, and I feel like there would be too many missing.
Sure.
So I see this pad, and I called in a prescription for Vicodin with that doctor's credentials. And I went to the pharmacy, the same Rite that years later that I cashed that other script in. And I walked in, I was picking up something for myself, I think antibiotic or something. And I called the script in under my aunt's name. And I told them, I'm going to pick up my aunt's too while I'm here. And they were like, oh, it's not ready. Come back in an hour. I said, all right, no problem. So I go home, and my aunt and my mother looking at me, and they're up in arms. The pharmacy called the doctor because they thought it was weird that the prescription was for Vicodin and not for OxyContin or Percocet.
Huh.
And my mother dragged me back to that store a half hour later. And I get there, and there's 2 plainclothes cops, 2 uniformed cops, the store manager, the pharmacist, the pharmacy assistant that I went to, that saw me a half hour earlier. She looked at me dead in the eye and said it wasn't him.
Huh.
Jeez.
Maybe she felt bad for me. I don't know. But
fuck,
I can only attribute that to God. And that's it. That's the only way.
Hey, one of our former guests put it really well, is that thank goodness life isn't fair, because shit would have been a lot worse.
Absolutely. I have an old sponsor that always says, if you got what you deserved, you wouldn't be here. So,
I got a question for you too. Have you So since your story essentially turned into the guy from AA where you're collecting cans and all that, have you talked to him since you've been clean?
No, never. I mean, I never saw him again.
Oh,
He
okay.
was a speaker in a psych ward that I was in. Much
Right.
like, I speak at these rehabs and detoxes. I rarely see the people that, I speak to afterwards. Once in a while I do. And it's always nice to see them. But
Sure.
I couldn't tell you his name. I couldn't tell you really what he looked like. I remember he had whitish hair.
Right.
What he did do, he gave me a big book though. And when I opened that book, whatever it was, 3 years later, my first sober day was March 12th of 2005. So the next day I get up in the morning, I try to go to a meeting, and I walk to a hospital that I had been flagged in as a drug seeker to go to my first meeting. And when I get there, they tell me the meeting moved. It's not there anymore. So that was my first attempt to go to a meeting. And I'm like, what do I do now? So I go home, and I'm going to reference The Sopranos again.
I love it.
The episode where, Christopher gets back from rehab and he's talking to Tony in the car about the steps. Right. And he talks about step 9, how, to make amends to people. And Tony's like, yeah, I think you should skip that one.
Let sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah. So I'm like, that's what I'll do. I'll do my steps. I got the big book out, and I'm looking, and I'm writing letters to all my friends on the block that haven't talked to me in years, that I robbed their houses, that I did all these terrible things to. And I write all these letters, and I go to all their houses, and I deliver them. And some accepted the letter with, a smile and a handshake. Some were like, get out of here. But that's what I did. And then I finally make it to the meeting that night. And afterwards, the old guy starts talking to me about, service and this. You got to come early, stay late, and do the steps. I'm like, oh, I did those already. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, I did them this morning. I didn't make the meeting, so I opened the book and I did my steps already. So I'm good with that. He just patted me on the back. He goes, keep coming, kid.
Well, that's one of the things, and it's funny because there's, my experience with AA. Some people, we got to be kind of delicate and working through the steps, whereas, my response is like, fuck it, let's get to it. Let's get through this. Come on, there's no reason to waste time. Let's work on it.
Everybody's different. The guy I have now, I've been sober 5.5 years, and he's an old timer, great guy. Takes people through the book, has studies in his house, but he's all about the fellowship and the connection of people.
Yeah.
So as far as going, like his thing going through work and he's not about that. And if you have a problem and you say, Pat, could you take me through this? He will. But as far as, that, you got to do this, and this, that's just not his style. And, God bless everybody's style. I used to be, oh, that guy's doing it wrong. Whatever works for you, man, because it's saving your life. So if you have to take 10 years, if you want to do it right away, do it right away. Whatever works for you, just do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, and for me, it's definitely the thing that you mentioned, that connectivity. That's the big, huge thing for me. Coming to an environment just of people of just sober mind. That's all I need. Hey, we got enough in common. Cool. We can sit in fellowship now.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to talk more about, before we get to the fun random questions and give you the last word, the work you're doing now. I want to know more about that, but also the perspective on things that are going on now. I know for us, Mikey and I and some of our guests, we're so grateful that we are done with that in our life because of the things like fentanyl that's out there and killing, people, especially teenagers, left and right and stuff like that. How do you reflect kind of on what's going on there out now in the drug culture, being that you're out doing service?
Yeah, I tell my wife all the time, I'd be dead. 1,000% I'd be dead if I was out there right now, because my whole claim to fame was, I know what I'm doing. I'm taking pills. I know what I'm getting. You don't know what you're getting out there anymore. Yeah. I have one guy that I sponsor that I'm friends with that, he died in his bathroom, and they had to Narcan him back because he thought he bought a Roxy and it was a pressed fentanyl.
Fuck.
There's a guy I talk about in the book, and I'm still friends with him to this day. I was in rehab with him in 2016. He introduced me to my sponsor. He took me to my first meeting. We're still friends. He's been struggling. I hadn't heard from him in a few months until the other day, and he called me. He just got out of treatment. and he was taking Percocet and Roxy's, and he went there, and when he did his urine test, it didn't come up for Oxy, it came up for fentanyl. So this whole time he thinks he's doing Percocet, and you can't get anything out there anymore. Yeah. So if you're out there right now, you're in any stage, you were playing Russian roulette with your life, with the opiates and the benzos and whatever I was doing. But now you might as well put a bullet in a gun, spin the wheel, and put it to your head, because that's what you're doing. Yeah. So many people are dying. So many people died over this whole, pandemic and the lockdown. You hear every week, you just hear somebody else. And a couple of weeks ago, a guy on my job passed away from it. And it's rough out there. It's rough out there. And the rehab around here just started opening its doors again to service, to go up there and speak. And I was able to go up there a couple of weeks ago and speak to some people, and it brings you back. I love going up there and doing these things, but I also like the fact that I'm able to leave when I'm done, because you see that hurt and you know how it feels, and I'm very happy and grateful that I'm past that point in my life. And, I've been past it twice. And that first time around, I took it for granted. A lot of people say that first time's a gift, the second time is hard. And it was, man. That, I didn't think I was taking it for granted back then. But now I look back on it, and, I never thought I was going to drink again. I never thought I was going to get high again. And I just stopped giving back. I took everything and I never gave back. Yeah. So now I try diligently every day to just try to live the right way, and I fall short. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I have my defects of character. You could ask my wife. But all in all, I live my life a much better way today. And I try to give back. It's about me, but it's also about giving back, because if it wasn't for those people that were here before me, I would not be here today. Yeah. So I try to be that person to other people. And it's a big part of the reason I wrote this book.
Yeah. For sure. Well, we thank you for writing the book and continuing to get out there. Now, when you do the speaking, is it usually at groups? Are you doing stuff where you're even going out talking to high school kids? What other kind of engagement?
I haven't done that yet. I would like to, but it's tough with the whole COVID thing. Before everything started, I was my first job was gotten for me by a state senator in New York. And my aunt was really good friends with him. And I actually reached out to him right before Election Day in 2016. 2016? No, 2018. It was a senatorial election. And he lost. But I stayed in touch with him, and he was supposed to start getting me connected with schools and stuff. And it just fell through. It never happened. So for now, I do meetings, I do rehabs, hospitals, and I've done a couple of incoming classes for my department. Excellent. And whatever I could do, wherever I could get the word out there, I try to do it.
Well, Mikey, random question time.
You ready?
Let's have some fun.
Yes, I am.
All right, this shit is just silly, so have a good time with it.
This one isn't really so random based off the conversation, but I got to ask, what's your number one favorite Mafia movie?
Goodfellas.
Ooh, I was going to say Goodfellas or A Bronx Tale.
Goodfellas.
That is
Bronx Tale. I like Bronx Tale too. I talked to Lilo on Instagram back and forth a lot. He's a good dude, man, and he turned his life around. But
yeah.
I got to go with Goodfellas, man. Goodfellas is my favorite.
Oh, of course.
Hell
it's
yeah.
Classic.
Hell yeah. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Time travel.
Why? That's interesting.
And it's not for the reason you would think, to go back and do everything over again. Right. It's just because there's a lot of different people in history and a lot of periods of time that I would just love to have been in.
Sure.
Revolutionary War, for whatever reason I'm infatuated with that. I just want to see what went on back then. Just like the frame of mind and, what was going on with people, just knowing how everything is today. And then just seeing how it was back then, I would just love to see that stuff, just history and how it unraveled. And I would just very interested in that stuff.
Fascinating. We've never gotten that before.
I was I would time travel back to the 70s or something where, better music and you didn't have to worry about math so much or the world ending. Okay, so I've gotten both sides on this next question. Not from any of our guests, but random people that I've asked, and some of them I don't understand. However, would you rather fight a horse-sized chicken or 10 chicken-sized horses?
I was listening to a podcast the other day. It was these two mob guys, and they asked this question.
Really?
No shit.
And they asked, the guy who hosted asked the former mobster the question, and then they laughed about it for the entire episode after that. And only because I heard it so much, I'm going to have to say, what was it again? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
A horse-sized chicken, just one of them, or
Okay.
10 chicken-sized horses.
Okay.
Mind you, those
It's
little
gonna
bastards are still strong.
It's going to be the horse-sized chicken.
Really?
You're the first to take it.
because,
You're the first on
listen,
this podcast to take it.
Really?
Yeah, but I've gotten multiple answers like from family and stuff like that. They've also
I'm going to say
said,
the horse-sized chicken because he might, the horse-sized chicken might beat me, but I just got to land one good shot. With the 10 of them, you never know. They could be biting your ankles.
you
and-
just punt them.
Yeah, but there's 10 of them. If one jumps on your neck,
If they get
you're
you
in
on the
trouble.
ground, you're fucked. But at
Yeah,
the
it's all
same
over.
time,
It's all over.
you got one beak the size of a horse nose, one peck, and you're just. I have this conversation with people, so I'm very interested on their answers.
Yeah, but you kill the huge chicken, you're eating good for a while. You know what I'm
There
saying?
you go. And like I said, it just takes that one good shot, and he's down. The other ones, you knock them out, then you get 9 other ones coming at you. Too much.
Grocery stores are still open. It's just a random question.
Yeah, but Mikey, there's a difference between the rugged nature of yes, I've killed this meal. It's like
I don't have that.
Here's a question, just kind of not one that we usually do, but as you could tell, my co-host over here, fabulously tattooed. I'm tattooed a little bit, but I know and I love the cover of your book. It's got the back of your hand tattoo. What is the meaning and significance for you for tattoos? Was this something post, in your rehabilitation phases, stuff that happened during, or?
All right. So my father died when I was 21, and it started when I was a kid. I wanted to, again, because I wanted to fit in with the kids in the neighborhood. They were all getting earrings, and my father was like, "Yeah, not getting an earring. I'll cut your earlobe off." Blah blah blah. So finally, I was playing hockey when I was playing the game, and I said, if I get a hat trick tonight, you have to let me get the earring. He says, all right, bet. You do that, you get the earring. I scored a goal with like a minute into the game, and I pointed up to him in the stands, and I pointed in my ear. And then I hit the post like 4 other times in that game, and I didn't score again.
Oh, shit.
He winds up letting me get the earring. And then I get a second earring in the other ear. Then I want to get a tattoo. And he says, Tommy, he goes, if you get a tattoo, I will cut the skin right out of your arm. So 21 years old, my father passes away. 2 weeks later, I went and I got a cross for him, for my father, just to kind of like give it to him. Like, you got, now I got it. And then I got him, and then I got his face on my shoulder. And it's just always something. Every tattoo I have means something to me. And I got maybe 2 more, and then the rest of them were in, either in recovery or when I was out there, in and out. I have my cousin that passed away from, an overdose. I have a prayer for him on my side. I have, stuff like gratitude stuff up here. I have the Serenity Prayer, St. Michael, 9/11. That's a big one. I have the eagle, and then the buildings on the back with the flag, and I had the Virgin Mary, Jesus, all stuff that, means something to me, that symbolizes stuff to me. And that's it. But I just love them. My sister-in-law bought me a gift certificate to get another one, and I haven't used it yet. So I haven't really decided what I want, but I got to get one soon.
Well, hopefully the missus really likes them too. Yeah.
She loves them. She's the one that, this Rose on my hand, her middle name is Rose.
Oh, right.
So here's the story. I had my ex-girlfriend's nickname tattooed on my wrist.
Oh boy.
And she hated that.
Yeah.
And I had it for a while. And I said, honey, it's not that I don't want to cover it up, but I had to find something good to cover it up with. And she sends me this picture one day of the Rose. And she's like, oh, my middle name is Rose. You got that? So I get it. But her mother's name is Rose. So every time I go there, her mother's like, oh, he got it for me. I got it for your daughter. But
You got them bonus points.
Yeah. But she loves them, thank God.
Right on. That's dope. Yeah, if I wasn't a single dad, I'd probably be, well, maybe not as covered as you two, but I'd be more on my way. Although I got my next one coming up September, so
Yeah, I only get mine for the girls. Okay, so the next question. No,
he's lying out of his
head. If you were stuck on I guess you kind of already answered that with Goodfellas. Give me another one besides Goodfellas. If you were stuck on a deserted island, what one movie and what album would you bring with you?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this question because I listened to a bunch of episodes and I was thinking about it. The movie, I'm going to say Rocky 2.
Okay.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because I am a huge fan of Rocky. It was probably the first real movie I watched with my father. And I thought it was a real boxing match. And when I was a kid, I was like 6 years old, maybe 5, 6 years old when it came out. And people used to babysit me. And they used to be like, oh, well, what movie you want us to rent? Like, you want Disney? You want this? I was like, no, Rocky 2. Like, I just loved Rocky 2 and all the Rocky movies. So it would be Rocky 2. My musical taste is all over the place. So I was thinking I had 3 albums in mind coming into this. I'm going to go with the Pearl Jam Unplugged from 1992.
Oh.
Little Pearl Jam, right on.
Now you said music all over the place. What would the other 2 have been?
Linkin Park Hybrid Theory and Eminem Recovery.
Yeah.
And you really are all over the place.
Yeah, kind of a nice gradual move.
All over the place. All over the place.
All right, let's go one more here, and then we'll leave you with the final thoughts. Is if a movie was made about your life, what genre would it be, and who would you want to play you?
What genre? Definitely drama. Who would play me? You know, I always said this, and it's far out there. Giovanni Ribisi.
Oh yeah,
I just love the way he acts. Ever since Boiler Room. I just love the way he goes about acting. Like when he was in Friends, the character he played there, and then Sneaky Pete. I love his mannerisms. I just think he's a really good actor.
Yeah, very underrated. Sneaky Pete was such a good freaking show.
Yeah.
I was bummed that I was like, nah, that's all you get. We're done.
Yeah,
Son
I
of
know.
Well, Mr. Figlioli, we really appreciate your time, and we like to leave the guests with any last words of encouragement for those listening. Maybe they've struggled with addiction, mental health, or someone they know and love does. So what words might you have to offer?
Yeah, first, I just want to thank you guys for having me. It's been a long time coming. We had to cancel a few times, but I do appreciate you guys having me. It was an honor to be on the show. And the only thing I could say to anybody out there that's struggling is if you think that there's no hope left, you're wrong. If you don't want to live anymore, there's a whole life ahead of you that you'll be missing out on. Because I was in that place. I was in that place where I did not want to live anymore. And I was in that place where I thought that I couldn't turn my life around. And if I would have known then what I know now and see where my life is, all I wanted was a normal life at that point. And what I have now has far exceeded that. So all I could say is that if you are out there and you are struggling, there's always hope. So make today that day, Make that choice and just change your life around, because I promise you, life does not get easier, but it does get better.